YouTube Live. This is going to be a two for today. I'm going on today, this morning. We're going to get updates on recruiting. It's been kind of quiet on that front. It may be quiet for a while, but I'm going to give you the latest on a couple of key recruiting pieces for Arkansas's 2025 class. Certainly one, and another one that's kind of on the fence, I guess, right now in terms of reclassifying for 2026. One player has visited Arkansas, another one hasn't. We're going to get into recruiting. We're going to do that first, but we're also going to give, I'll call it a quick preview. Arkansas, Alabama. Every game for the Razorbacks this year after starting 0-5 in SEC play has been in must-win mode, in my opinion. And you could say, well, at this point now, because Arkansas can win a game, lose a game, figure out a way to cobble enough wins to get through the second half of SEC play to get itself back in to NCAA tournament at large bid projections, that it's not must win. But I actually ranked the top 20 matchups this season on Arkansas's 31 game schedule way back before the season ever tipped off. And number one, I had Kentucky, and the second most important game was Alabama. Well, you beat Kentucky. It was probably your most important win because you were 1-6 in the SEC, and you did not have a quad one win in the league. Michigan back in early December was your only quad one win on the entire season. So Kentucky's held true as the most important game. I had Alabama ranked second for obvious reasons. You're getting them at Bud Walton Arena. That is now the standard for SEC teams. As good as this league is, Alabama is still the standard. And the Tide come in 8-1 in league play and ranked, third in the country. It doesn't get much better than that. Another Final Four contender kind of season, a projected one seed in the NCAA tournament. And this is a chance for Arkansas to have a statement win at home. The three statement wins on the season now, when you add Texas, are all away from home. Two true road games in last week's. To me, every game I said after the 0-5 start has been must win. Certainly Arkansas did that. Three of its last four. But we're going to get into this preview a little bit later. First, we're going to hit recruiting. I just kind of want to set the stage because we're going to talk a little bit about the matchups between the Razorbacks and the Tide and some other things. But let's get recruiting because it's just been really quiet there. First of all, this was probably, if you were looking at SEC matchups at home for Arkansas on a weekend to bring in visitors, this was the biggest one and the best one. Unless something changes, since yesterday, like a player and his family decided they want to come up and attend this game, a recruit that's in the proximity, Arkansas is not planning. They have no planned visitors for this weekend. And, we were talking for so long, and we'll talk now about class of 2025 Nate Mint, the 6'9" combo forward out of Virginia that Calipari invested a lot of time going out to see, whether it was on campus, different high school events where he was playing in. But if you started, you'd run out of fingers on one hand trying to count up all the stops that Calipari made going back to September when the NCAA opened up that live recruiting period again. And you thought, I had a source that has NBA connections that weeks ago had said, look, I've heard this guy's earmarking some game that Arkansas is going to have. And this was actually back in December, so before we got into SEC play, but I didn't figure it'd be one of those quad four. Arkansas didn't host any major names in non-conference in Bud Walton Arena where you'd want to bring a visitor in necessarily of that caliber. So earmarking what date could it be in SEC play? Well, this would be the biggest. There's other opportunities, but it's not going to happen today. And as far as I'm concerned now, after talking to two more sources, at this moment, things are still pretty quiet with Amen. A lot of stuff that hasn't gotten out in terms of what he's going to do, but he's taken most of his visits already. So there's not a lot more to it. He is a guy that's obviously a spring signee. That doesn't mean he can't make a decision sooner than that, and maybe he will. But he's a guy similar to Caleb Wilson, where the Arkansas visit was really kept under wraps. I finally got around to giving, when we ran out of calendar in October and November, getting to later, or excuse me, in October, finally got around to saying, well, here was the date that Caleb Wilson was to come in. He didn't make that date. Then he publicly said he's coming to visit Arkansas, and that was the weekend after the one I said it was supposed to be for, so he'd moved it. That didn't happen. Then they made it another weekend. I think it was the following weekend, and then that never materialized either. So this is a situation with Nate Mint. because unlike the Caleb Wilson situation where I did have a date that I was told, with Amen, I've never been given a date. I've never been said he's coming in for this. But given all the time that Calipari spent on that, he's not wasting his time with players and prospects that are not telling him, I'm coming to visit and that I'm serious about Arkansas. Amen did include the Razorbacks when he cut his list down a few weeks ago in his top 11. That's a pretty big list, but he's visited a lot of the schools on that list. So I've talked to a couple of sources. One said that it's pretty close to the Kentucky part of it, said that the Kentucky coaches haven't even confirmed this latest talking point that Amen's going to come in and kind of prioritizing Kentucky as of late, maybe coming in for a Tuesday visit when the Wildcats host the Tennessee Volunteers at Rupp Arena. So there's been some fodder out there, some chat that maybe he's going to visit Kentucky, and that may happen, and it might happen. But as of yesterday, Kentucky's coaching staff wasn't sure that was even going to happen. As for Arkansas, the point is that two sources I just recently talked to within the last 24, 48 hours have said the same teams they think, Duke and Louisville. Both said, and I've heard this prior, but both said just recently that Notre Dame continues to be a school that's churned as far as maybe a dark horse in this, and maybe the third team in that top three, in a top three out of those 11. Well, Arkansas, for a while, there was a stretch there where, because of the intense attention that Calipari was putting on this and some other things that were out there, I had, some people reaching out to me from the state of Virginia, and they thought Arkansas had a real shot to get up there and compete with Duke for this. But as of now, I don't see a pathway even for a publicly announced visit. Like I said, at one point, Amen intended to visit Arkansas because Calipari would not have put all that energy into it, and I wouldn't have had a source that gives me good information saying, look, I don't know the date, but I'm just told he's coming, and he's going to come to when Arkansas is hosting at one of its bigger games. And that, again, couldn't have possibly been in December. It would have had to have been sometime in SEC play. And this is the biggest one today. All right, so Arkansas doesn't have any visitors playing to come in. Nate Ament was a guy we've been keeping an eye on. Let's see if something shifts or changes. But here's what one of those two sources I recently talked to about Ament said. They go, look, they think that this is turning into another NIL, situation where you're trying to, you're trying to drive up that NIL game. And so Arkansas, if you look back in the last several months, Arkansas has dipped out. They dipped out on Caleb Wilson when it became obvious that that's what he was doing. It looked forever like Caleb Wilson might be Kentucky bound. He ends up committing to North Carolina, although it was Kentucky, North Carolina, but Kentucky kind of seemed to have the momentum there. And at the end of the day, there are going to be limits even for Kentucky. I don't know if it came down to that or if all things were equal and similar in NIL, but my source says they think North Carolina did a late push on NIL and actually improved on where Kentucky was, and Kentucky, didn't push any more chips back in the middle of the table. Arkansas has done the similar thing multiple times. We've talked about it so many times with players. Let's go through a few of them. There was a catch and release early on when Calipari came to Arkansas and was bringing players from Kentucky with him. Jordan Burks was one that Arkansas had done the paperwork to get him lined up for school. That ends up not being a Razorback because Adu Thero came into the picture. Similar position-wise, Thero's always had the edge, the higher regarded player. And Calipari said he's keeping a tight rotation, 8 or 9, and it was catch and release. Burks ends up going to Georgetown. That was a player that was privately committed to Calipari. It didn't work out. Kason Pryor, frontline guy. Brandon Garrison, frontline guy. Arkansas could have had both of those players, but had limitations on the NIL valuation for both. And ended up having Trevor Brazile, as it turned out, in its back pocket at a much better value NIL, and also relative what he might bring to the table. Pryor off to Louisville, Brandon Garrison off to Kentucky, sight unseen, right off the heels of his Arkansas visit, because teams came in late for whatever reasons. I think with Kentucky, they didn't want to lose. They'd already lost players off their roster. Maybe Pope would have kept them, maybe not, but just for the optics. Kason Pryor was a need for Louisville. Louisville stepped up to an NIL level that Arkansas wasn't willing to do for that particular player. It's not about not having enough NIL money. It's about how do you want to prioritize it? What other needs do you have? Where can you add? Where can you get the most bang for your buck, and spread it around? And so we've seen that in this high school recruiting. Arkansas's got a top 5 signed class going back to November. It's backcourt players, 2 5-star McDonald's All-American and Darius Acuff Jr. and Malik Thomas. Acuff Jr. is having a national player kind of the season in terms of what, not just numbers he's putting up, but his impact and effect on close games, on big stages. Malik Thomas is no slouch at overtime elite. Isaiah Seeley, Arkansas's third signee and a top 70, 80 4-star recruit here out of Springdale's having an outstanding season. Arkansas, no matter what service you looked at, has a top 5 class with those 3 players in this recruiting class nationally as a team. Some have them ranked as high as 3. I've seen them at 4, but top 5. So it's not like Arkansas hasn't done work there. Calipari says he's going to take 3, maybe 4 high school guys moving forward. It's what he did, bringing only 3 high school signees from Kentucky. And that's what he's got so far. But we saw him pursue Muhammad Silla, the big man, that came and took a visit to Arkansas, sort of on the fly there. I think it was December 1st on a Sunday. Not even a game to go to. It was really kind of rushed. It was his last visit. And he ends up committing privately to Calipari late in December. And Georgia Tech, who we always talked about, not one of the talking points I had on this as a lead up was they had NIL money that hadn't landed on guys they went after, and they had a little bit more they might push to the table if they thought it was worth it. Here's a guy that ranked only by a couple of services on 3 Sports, has him top 15 in the country, and he's moved now inside the top 30 in 247, the 6'11 center. Well, Georgia Tech came back with a higher offer than where Arkansas was. When he committed to Calipari, my sources now come back and said Georgia Tech actually had a slightly higher NIL package for him than Arkansas did, but he still chose Calipari. Georgia Tech exceeded that. I don't know by how much. The kid wanted $1 million. I don't know where it went, but it might have exceeded that, I'm told. And that was the difference in that. That's why his announcement was delayed and why that happened. So Arkansas, this is the one thing I like about Calipari's recruiting. You're not going to be desperate, especially for a high school player, when you're going to have portal recruiting coming up, and you can prioritize more and spread out more NIL money. You're also going to have levels of player retention that you're going to want to have on this current Arkansas team as we talk recruiting right now. That's going to be always part of your recruiting is some kind of player retention. What does that look like? Is it Billy Richmond III? Is it Carter Knox? Is it Big Z? Is it DJ Wagner? Is it Trevor Brazil? Is it a combination of some of those guys? But if you're going to do that, I don't think Arkansas is going to keep all 5 of those. Did I get my math right? Is that 5? I think that were 5 names I threw out there. But at the same time, the retention's a part of it, and so you want to have NIL for that. But again, you look across the board. This Nate Ament situation could be, because I don't know the answer to this, but my source feels like this is another, drive up the NIL price tag for Nate Ament. And so Arkansas will have limits, and Calipari, like he did with Caleb Wilson, will step away if he feels like he's being used to drive up NIL. And it's going to put Arkansas in an unrealistic place, even for some of these high-level guys. Again, Nate Ament, top 5 rated 5-star, 6'9" combo forward. I've made all the comparisons for months and months and months to Michael Porter Jr., going back to when I saw him play on the Adidas circuit down in Texas back in early May last year, or mid-May last year. So I've been watching this young man perform in various not only grassroots event, high school events. Been watching him online, streaming stuff, and he's every bit the top 5 rated 5-star guy. He looks like a lottery projection, but at some point, Arkansas's got to figure out what's best moving forward. And so we'll see. Was it a situation? There's one player that I don't think Arkansas backed away from that it really didn't get, and that was Chris Sinak. Sinak chose Houston. Sinak visited Arkansas. That's one area where I thought Arkansas, even though it looked like it was probably going to be Houston or maybe somebody else, Arkansas continued to work that. So we're not going to point at every guy that doesn't come to Arkansas and say, well, Arkansas didn't lose. They made their choice and moved on. Not always, but it's been very rare since Calipari's been here that that's actually been the case. And maybe he reads the writing on the wall on a couple of guys and thinks, well, I'm just not going to play this game. We're going to focus our energies elsewhere. Because there does become a point in time where you wonder how serious someone is about playing for you and giving you everything, or if they're really just using you. And even if they chose you, if you ended up being the highest bidder, what are you getting there? Are you getting someone really focused on what playing for you as much as they are now? It's really just about that bottom dollar. So you're trying to read these situations, and it's not just Arkansas staff that has to do that, but Calipari's been the best in recruiting. And so there's, even with NIL now, he's done a really good job. Arkansas's portal class and high school class were both ranked top 5 coming into this season in year one. It's just like he said, he's moving the headquarters. And now Arkansas is a serious basketball team again when we talk about the national stage. How serious, we don't know. I mean, if Arkansas is back to being a bubble team, you can say, well, how serious is that? Well, you've only played half your league games and you looked dead in the water, dead to rights. We're going to talk about this Alabama game now here shortly, because I'm going to wrap up recruiting. Mikai Mirin, class of 2026, visited Arkansas back in September. One of the sources I spoke with in just the last 48 hours, so I'd have an update on that, says he continues to tell people that he may just stay in class of 2025, but everyone around him and people that are, talking to other folks and all that, the word continues to be he's maybe more likely to reclass. All right. He's visited Utah, Michigan, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Duke may be in the mix, some other teams. But look, and he had a list of 7 or so schools. Arkansas was in it. I had a source that spoke directly with him that said, hey, he said the Arkansas visit, comparing it to Utah, Michigan, was by far the better visit. Said good things about it. But this is a thing where this source says they're not sure that some of these programs that are in on him are going to be interested if he reclasses to 25. I think that's wild. He's a top 5 rated 5-star, 6'10", 6'11", versatile guy, MVP of the 16U, Nike E16 Peach Jam Championship, playing with J.J. Andrews out of Arkansas back in the summer. But at his size, his skill set, and his shooting ability, he's like a young version of Luke of Laurie Markkinen, an all-star in the NBA. So I find it hard to believe that teams might not be as interested if he's going to actually reclass. Calipari's been a coach who's down with that. He'll recruit players, and sometimes he wants them to do that. So let's see where this goes. But this source told me they thought Utah or Michigan might be the 2 schools the most serious about throwing NIL money at him, even if he reclasses. So I don't know if Arkansas changes its valuation recruiting him. If he moves up, do they think, well, he may not be ready to help us as much as we need as a reclass, but then you've got to play a long game if you don't with him, and you may not get him, and he may be, more of a favorable prospect to what he brings to the table than other guys if you, focus on that next class and he stays in 2026. So I said all that to say I'm not sure where Arkansas is going to land on that. This is just according to one source. You like the fact that he loved the visit. It still sounds like there's a strong possibility he reclasses 2025, in which case Arkansas and Calipari, if it landed, would have their biggest piece, their first, frontline player added in high school recruiting in 2 recruiting cycles now since he's come to Arkansas. If you go outside of those 2 names, Amin and Mirin, I don't know what's really left on the high school part of Arkansas, and that's not a problem. Again, you loaded up with 3 guys, and you said you're keeping your classes to 3 or 4. It seemed obvious to me that Calipari was trying to expand on that by recruiting guys like Silla and Ament, who he spent a lot of time on, and even Mirin. But let's see what happens. But that means, with maybe there's things continue to develop. Maybe you feel like you're going to have a chance with more guys to retain off this current roster. Maybe you feel like you're going to get what you need out of the portal on that front line, and that you would have taken a guy like Silla, but maybe he was always going to be maybe a development piece in year one, maybe not, because still a raw developing player. That's, again, some services don't even have rated. So there's more than one way to look at this. It's not excuse making. It's, you got to peel all this back. Things change. in terms of your philosophy. Arkansas's dealt with a lot of attrition this year. It seems odd that now, down to an 8 rotation, they're playing their best basketball. But injuries, illness, all those things, foul trouble, all those things have dogged Arkansas at times because they are short on some numbers. So you might expand your high school recruiting numbers, your retention / portal. So all that's to be seen a little bit later. All right, we're 21 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. Please hit subscribe, like, and share if you haven't done it already. Alabama, I earmarked this as the second most important game on Arkansas season before it ever started. Kentucky was one. Easy to do, right? I ranked the top 20 out of 31 regular season games. That's over at HogvilleNET somewhere. Still, you can go look at that. Agree to disagree on some of it, but those were the two. I think it is not only true and remain true, but look at where this is all coming together, where Arkansas needed it the most. Now, Alabama, again, a Final Four contender again, arguably the best team in the SEC, ranked third nationally. Auburn's number one with only one loss. Bama has 3. Bama is 6-3 in quad 1 games, 7-0 in quad 2. You look at every category as a team. This team leads the nation, the Tide, 90 points per game. Has a plus 11.9, nearly 12 point per game margin, final margin. So beating teams by 12 points per game. Well, you're scoring 90. It's hard to keep up. It's the third rated offense. And you look at efficiency, according to KenPom, defense not as good, but there are certain areas where they're good on defense that we're going to talk about. But this Alabama team brings all the, national focus on this game that you're not going to get with Cal going back to Rupp, but you don't need it. Bud Walton's going to be rocking. Bama's a big-time team, and it helps that Arkansas is trending in the right direction. A lot of eyes on this game probably today, especially the opportunity for the Razorbacks for folks to come into Bud Walton, pack the place, wild it out, and for Arkansas to get a third consecutive quad 1 win would be the Hogs' third consecutive win. The other quad 1 wins on the season, back-to-back on the road in the last week, and then Michigan away from home in New York City at Madison Square Garden back in December. This would be Arkansas's first quad 1 win at home. And boy, would it be the big one. This would be the most impressive win on your resume because this is a legitimate Final Four contender. We know Michigan's good in the Big Ten. That is a really good team. On the level of Alabama, I don't think so. Certainly Kentucky and Texas aren't. But I do think that Alabama would add more to Arkansas's resume other than the next quad 1 win. Arkansas's 3-6 in quad 1 games. Georgia, I mentioned this the other night, off the strength of its 19-point home win against LSU, didn't budge from 32nd in net at that time. If Georgia ever gets back to top 30 in net, I think the Bulldogs host a ranked Mississippi State team today, a top 20 net team. If Georgia wins that game, they'll be back in the top 30 the following day in net, and that would be Arkansas's fourth quad 1 win, not knowing yet what the Alabama result will be. But this is a huge opportunity. I had someone tell me that they thought, man, Arkansas's kind of getting things together. It's a shame they get Bama next, that they got to play them. And I think the opposite. The iron's hot right now. You're playing your best basketball. You got things clicking. Believe it or not, as bad as Arkansas has been offensively, they haven't always been so bad defensively in league play, but that 0-5 start that turned to 1-6, Arkansas was just ugly offensively for the most part in that stretch. The one win over Georgia at home in league play to that point, Arkansas had to dirty that game up and shot horrendously, just turned it into an offensive rebound, generate free throws and go make free throws kind of game and overcome a 15-point deficit. They trailed by 15 in both halves against Georgia. So Arkansas in these last 2 games not only went on the road and got those quad 1 wins, beating top 30, both teams top 25 at the time in net. Kentucky was 10th at that point. But you outshot them everywhere. These were both teams good offensively, especially Kentucky. When you look at them percentage-wise, inside the arc, outside the arc, free throw line, all that, Arkansas outshot them overall field goal percentage from the field, from the three-point line, from the free throw line, and in both cases, they made more everywhere. That's not been Arkansas's DNA all year. You didn't see that coming. So as good as Alabama is offensively, Arkansas right now has got confidence. They've got a chemistry with the group that's playing. This is no slight against Boogie Fland, But I think several things happened. I think Arkansas was a little bit crowded in that guard spot, Fland, DJ Wagner, and Nelly Davis in terms of potential roles, expectations to produce in volume. And in this situation, less is actually more. Arkansas has gotten bigger uh, positions 2 through 4 in its starting lineup. And what I mean by that is Adu Thero's been your 3-4 combo, but you had those other 3 guards typically in the starting lineup. Nelly at the 3. Now Nelly's your 2 guard. You've got Carter Knox as a regular starter getting heavy minutes, who's a sturdy 6'6". He plays kind of like a 3-4 combo at times. He's strong and he's playing. He's bought into a role and he's progressed. Adu Thero's Adu Thero. He's still putting on that cape and going to give you those blue collar, let's get bloody bully ball plays. And now Nelly Davis, we're seeing his impact more and more the more minutes he gets defensively. Yeah, he's gotten better offensively. We're going to talk about that. But look at him defensively right now. The guy is just a menace, but there's a physicality part to that. So Arkansas has gotten bigger and stronger, even though the true frontline guys aren't stronger. Big Z's gotten better as a rebounder. There's still, physicality issues there, but he brings other matchup problems for teams because of his ability to knock down threes, pass out high on the court, and then alter and block shots, which he's starting to pick back up again. He brings other qualities, but this combination of things has kind of unlocked something for Arkansas. Nelly Davis, it's like someone gave him a pacemaker for his mojo. Because it was like you flipped a switch. It didn't happen gradually. It just like a switch was flipped. Like someone just put a pacemaker on his mojo, flipped, hit a button and said, work, go to work. Well, that's what he's done. Let's look at these last 4 games. Arkansas's won 3 out of 4. I mentioned the back-to-back road games at home win over Georgia. Arkansas's a whisker away from being 4-0. That close loss to Oklahoma. I know Arkansas, if they had that game right now, Lenardi's moved Arkansas all the way up in his most recent bracketology on Friday. He's moved the Hogs all the way up to the first team on the first 4 out list. So they're one spot away from being projected in Lenardi's bracketology from being in the NCAA tournament, probably as a play-in. We know there's 9 more league games to go plus the SEC tournament. You got half of your league, and most of them are quad 1 win opportunities. The rest are quad 2, except for LSU at home after Bama. So there's a chance Arkansas could pick up one bad loss. LSU just fell over the line, 75th in net, to go from a quad 2 home opportunity to now quad 3. So you got to win that game. That's not must win. It's must not lose. You can't afford. Arkansas has no bad losses in quad. They're 4-5 away from home. That's really good, especially for a team 3-6 in its league and that was started 1-6. And they're 3-3 in true road games, including 2-3 in the SEC. And both of them, again, in SEC play, quad 1, top 25 net. Michigan's the same, top 20 net. And that was not a true road game. That was neutral site. So Arkansas, no bad losses, really strong away from home, picking up quad 1 wins, plenty more opportunities, and they're already just 1 slot away back after just a brutal stretch and not even being on the bubble anymore. It's happened that quickly. And again, it's not that Arkansas got better without Boogie Fland. I think they would have improved with him. I just think the dynamics are different. Look at what Kentucky's doing by losing Lamont Butler. They don't have They don't have another guy that can really play point guard. When they played the Razorbacks, it's Jackson Robinson. Kentucky's struggling right now. They've got decent pieces. They got a decent style of play. It was a great matchup for Arkansas. But Lamont Butler is not only a veteran guy, but he's a scorer. He's a facilitator, and he ran that team much better than it's running on its without him. Arkansas had a guy that's been a point guard, as starting point guard last year at Kentucky. Didn't always play point, but he spent a significant amount of time in DJ Wagner. And so even he has an element to his game. I mentioned Arkansas getting bigger and stronger positions 2, 3, and 4, the way it stacks up. But even at point guard, Arkansas is a little bigger and stronger. What is the strength of DJ Wagner? He was Arkansas's best shot creator behind Boogie Fland, but most of his is going to the basket. Jordan Pope was no match for him. Now, Wagner had an off shooting night. He started hot, missed some shots, but nobody really got in front of him for Texas. And he had that huge second half against Kentucky. He's going to have opportunities today, and he's doing a good job not only creating his downhill stuff, but he's running the team well. He had 8 assists and only 1 turnover against Kentucky. He led Arkansas in assist at Texas. He had 4. He did have 3 turnovers, but still he had more assists than turnovers. That's better than the alternative, and made some big plays late. So to me, Arkansas has had a shift of guys improving to this point in the season and maybe getting a little stronger and a little better in some areas, just by the way that guys are starting to maybe play at their best. Nelly Davis, I didn't think this was going to happen this late in the season, but the last 4 games he's led Arkansas in scoring at over 17 points per game. He's averaging 4.5 rebounds. He's averaging nearly 3.5 steals. Think about that. The guy's getting a monster, getting deflections, jumping passing lanes, just poking the ball out of other guards or wings' hands when they try to rip through. He's not even letting them get to the rip part. He's anticipating the way they're moving, and he's getting to the ball sooner than they're thinking about the next thing they're going to do. So he's catching them off guard. He's disrupted a lot of offensive possessions out there just by doing that. And then he's not only getting live ball steals, but he's also, some of his deflections are leading to dead ball turnovers for Arkansas, knocking the ball off the player going out of bounds, things like that. Arkansas's had some shot clock violation defensive stands, but partly because Nelly's adding 2 or 3 more seconds to the possession by knocking the ball loose. And teams are now late in the clock trying to secure the ball. And even when they do get a shot off, it's not always great. He has been huge defensively on the glass, averaging nearly 2.5 assists per game. So and there's been shot creation in these last 2 games from Nelly. We didn't see that. It was mostly catch and shoot on low volume. And when he put the ball on the deck prior to these last 4 games, he was really trying to find someone to pass to. And there's a pressure there when you've got a prolific scoring point guard and a guy like Boogie Flan, whose efficiency numbers are better than yours, and whose shot creation honestly is better than yours, and a guy like even DJ Wagner who can get downhill to give you 10 to 12 points a game. It just got a little crowded on, are there not enough basketballs to go around in this backcourt? Carter Knox is a guy, less is more with him. He was a guy that to me for a while was looking to chase field goal attempts and get shots up and chasing points, and not really understanding what's a good shot, what time in your possession. Oh, you took a 3 with your feet weren't set with 25 seconds still on the clock. Well, you can get that shot 15 seconds from now if that's the best shot and that's the only thing in the clock running down. Right now, he's being a lot more deliberate in terms of thinking about doing something else to help the team. He's learned how to play with that frame that he's got. He's gotten better and better at that. He'll crash for those offensive rebounds, defensive rebounds. He's tough defensively. He's getting better. So when you look at these individual pieces, I mentioned Nelly Davis and what his numbers look like. Let's not also forget he's made 14 of 16 free throws in these last 4 games. So he's only missed 2. And he was a guy, that was his strength, was the percentage, but just not generating free throw attempts. Now he's starting to do that. Adu Thero, again, Arkansas, he's been around 8 rebounds per game. I only played 22 minutes, was ill the other night, and the win at Texas still gave Arkansas 14 points and 5 rebounds. I think a couple of steals and maybe a block. Only 6 of 12 at the foul line after going 10 of 12 at Kentucky. Keep an eye on that because he's a guy that generates a ton of free throw attempts. And in close games where those little margins matter, when he's taking a big bulk of your free throw attempts, Arkansas needs him to be on point. So we'll see how that plays out today. But Thero, it's hard to complain about him. 15.5 points in these last several games and over 7 rebounds per game in that stretch, 7.3. And he does other things. We know he gets steals, but he'll block some shots. Not a big 3-point shooter. He's not really a shot creator in a traditional sense, but he's the kind of guy in the same way that a Kamani Johnson just did something that nobody else could do on a much bigger scale. This is what he does. So there is a little more nuance relative to Kamani, but relative to other scorers, when you're averaging 16 points a game on the season, that's pretty good. But he's not a guy that's creating much of that from the 3-point line. He'll knock down a mid-range here and there. It's mostly slash and gas, get out in transition, find ways to get to the free throw line, and he cobbles it together. That's great. But that kind of scoring for me If that's your leading scorer, that way you might be in trouble. You might be in trouble. I've said that for a while this year. And you look at this last 4 games, Arkansas's 3-1 against the toughest part of its schedule right to this point of the season, and it's Nelly Davis leading the team, and he's gotten more efficient. You look at the last 2 games, 7 of 14 from 3 combined against Kentucky and Texas on the road, 50% there. I mentioned the free throw shooting numbers. He's starting to get some volume there. Adu Thero, I'm just fine with him being Robin in the scoring department. Doesn't mean he can't be your leading scorer and you win the game. That was the case at Kentucky. But Kentucky had, a 5-out, really soft team. I thought Texas was softer than I thought it would be. Alabama's a different animal. We're going to go through some of that. But Alabama, you can attack. I mentioned third overall in offense. In the 80s in defensive efficiency, they're really good in some areas, arguably elite in 2 or 3 areas defensively. But we were kind of focusing on Arkansas right now. But you look at DJ Wagner, 12.8 points per game in the last 4. A guy averaging 10.5 on the season. He's raising that marker. He's had huge second halves when you look at those games against Michigan and Kentucky, scoring the ball. And he's doing a nice job facilitating. Even though he had the 3 turnovers in this last outing, you look at the 4 games as a whole, he's kind of driving down his turnover numbers. And then Carter Knox and Big Z both averaging 10 points per game. Knox 86% from the free throw line. I mean, he was 6 of 6. He was 4 of 4 late against Texas when the refs helped the Longhorns have a chance there. He was just huge at the free throw line. Only took 2 shot attempts. One of those was a 3. Arkansas was 2 of 8 from 3 in the first half. He hit the only one that didn't hit the rim and go straight up and come back through. That was DJ Wagner. Knox's was nothing but net. So he was 1 of 1 from 3. And I guess he missed another field goal attempt, 1 of 2 overall, but 6 of 6 at the line. But a guy that's averaging 4.5 rebounds in the last 4 games, his minutes have gone up. He's given Arkansas steals. He's given Arkansas block shots. He'll have a couple of assists. I mean, he's playing the right way. His defense, his physicality. He and Adu Thero are the 2 physical players. And now Nelly in the backcourt there at the 2. And even DJ, relative to what Boogie was physically in some of these matchups, Arkansas's just gotten a little bit more physical. Now, it hasn't translated in rebounding in every game, especially on keeping teams off the offensive glass lately. That could be an issue today with Alabama because this is one of the better rebounding teams in the country. I mean, it's elite. Arkansas is not. Arkansas is minus 4.4 rebounds per game in SEC play. So the margin's not very good there, and we've seen most of that on the offensive glass. That's where Kentucky and Texas really outplayed Arkansas in games where Arkansas, if you look at it through totality, the entire second half against Kentucky and most of the game against Texas were in control on the scoreboard because they were getting it done in other areas. But this is an opportunity, as good as Alabama is everywhere. And one of the things about Arkansas is we were going through the individual players. Talked about Knox, Avicic's averaging 10. He's knocking down threes. He's a good passing threat out high and dribble handoff and 2-man game. And he brings matchup problems because when he's knocking down some threes and has confidence there, you saw Arkansas try to go inside to him. He's got good touch around the basket and exploit Texas in that front line. It was really a good game plan. He got some good looks. He got a couple of dunks out of it. Missed some close range shots that were just kind of rolled off the rim on him. They were right there. He's got to get better when the game gets a little more physical for him and he gets close to the basket. He has raised his rebounding numbers a bit. He was 1 point away at Texas from having another double-double. He had first one of his career at Missouri the last time Arkansas had a bad loss on the road, or last time they had a road loss, period. And then has increased his numbers everywhere, but 9 points and 12 rebounds against Texas. So he's doing a better job at rebounding. If you get into him, you might have a better chance at scoring around the rim. Texas, for whatever reason, didn't always try to drive into him. They tried to ball fake him up, and he did a decent job of holding his ground. He was intimidating. He alters shots when he doesn't block him. 4 big blocks against Texas. But those are the 5 guys going from Nelly, Thero, DJ, Big Z, and Knox. That's been your starters. It's been a great recipe. And then Billy Richmond off the bench. I mean, Jonas Adu and Trevor Brazile give you a few plays here and there, maybe a handful of plays collectively. I would have never guessed that would have been enough for Arkansas to do what it's doing now with those guys doing that. But Billy Richmond giving you 9 or 10 minutes. It feels like he's always a box score plus, and he's getting something in transition. Maybe he's getting a steal. He'll handle the ball a little bit for Arkansas and bring it up. When he goes to the free throw line, he's knocking those down. He was 4-4 at Texas. He'll block a big shot. He had a big block late in that game when Arkansas was kind of going back and forth from a 2-possession to 3-possession lead, thanks to the officials helping Texas out. I mean, there was a lot of water carried in that second half for Texas. Well, it didn't work out, did it? But even Billy Richmond, I think, has been Arkansas. If you're talking a top 5 as your starters, Richmond's been the next guy. Can Arkansas win a game today with that formula? And if you get another game where Edu and Brazil are not giving you as much, maybe this is a game today with the energy back at home. I mean, I don't know. I'm just throwing something out there. Maybe you get a little more from them. Maybe everybody comes together and has their best game somehow. And we don't know how Big Z is going to hold up, but he's played better consistently. It's not like he's having one really, good game and an off game. He hasn't really had that since the Missouri game when Arkansas got beat by 18. He was a lone bright spot. I remember we talked about it on one of these, and one of my segments here with Pig Trail Nation, and we just went on and on about all the problems. And then I threw that in as well. If you're looking for a silver lining, that was it. Well, there's been more than one in this last stretch of 4 games since then, but even Big Z going back 5 games has playing his best basketball of the season. So we'll see what Arkansas gets. Arkansas, even in the 0-5 start, 1-6, the Razorbacks weren't always really bad defensively. You look at the 3-point shooting and overall field goal shooting against Tennessee on the road, against Florida at home. Some of the other games, Arkansas made it really ugly. The problem was Arkansas's offense and 3-point shooting was so bad that even though they maybe were driving down percentages on their opponents, they were worse. And then they were doing it was the self-inflicted wounds and the not being consistent at the free throw line. They generate more free throws against Florida but miss 11, or they wouldn't get enough compared to the other team. Shoot a good percentage, really good percentage, like at LSU, but then LSU's living at the line and making 90%. There were games like that where Arkansas was zigging when it needed to zag. I keep saying that, and couldn't get out of their own way. Even when they were driving down numbers, field goal percentage-wise, from some of these better teams, there were stretches in those games where Arkansas had a chance, and they'd have huge letdowns on defense. Sometimes they're transition defense. Sometimes it was just an assignment bust or not a rotation. Struggles at stretches defending the 3-point line, and by that time, you're down 12, 15 points. And even though you got better there and the overall percentage looked good, it was those pockets. Sometimes it's not the overall thing, but in key moments and in certain stretches of the game where you just kind of take yourself out of it. Arkansas is not good enough, I don't think, to play from behind a lot. They got to be in the fight, and they were front runners against, again, Kentucky and Texas for the most part in those games. They dominated Texas from the outset. Kentucky, it was kind of back and forth in that first half. Then Arkansas took command early in the second half. All right, so Alabama poses a lot of problems. I mentioned 90 points per game leads the NCAA. They're top 20 in assists at 17. They're one of the top rebounding teams in the country. They're the top 2 or 3 in 3-point attempts. I think they're number 1 at 33-point attempts per game. They make over 10. Their percentage is around 32%. That's not great, but guess what? It doesn't have to be when you're getting up that many. They shoot 60% from 2. So they're, top 8, top 10 in 2-point field goal percentage. And it's because if they're not shooting threes, they're not settling. They're getting all the way to the basket. And then they get to the free throw line. They shoot 27 free throws per game. That's also top 10 or so in the country on how many they take. Their percentage isn't great. It's 72%, but again, they're getting there so much. So what happens is it becomes about math. That's the one thing about Nate Oates' offensive system and why it's so good. It's really at the end of the day about math. The simple equation in this 3-point era. 3 out of 6 field goal attempts inside the arc is 50%. 2 out of 6 from 3 is 33%. Not good, right? Well, it's the same 6 points. So the more you put up, even if your percentage isn't as good as some teams that take fewer. I mean, Texas, for example, was shooting 37% from 3 coming into that game last week or a few days ago. Well, that's 5 percentage points better than Alabama's number, but they were only making 7.7. they weren't making as many. Texas or Alabama's over 3, and they get to the free throw line a lot. So they don't have to be elite percentage wise. They're good, but it's just about adding those numbers, generating possessions. And that's where Arkansas went toe to toe with Kentucky on its home court in a pace kind of game. I was surprised by that. Matchups are different. I don't know that favors Arkansas. Texas was a good shooting team, wasn't as prolific offensively as Kentucky, but good from 2, good from 3, good from the free throw line. Really good. And I said pregame on that one. I did a pregame show, and I said, look, Arkansas needs to keep this pace down a little bit and keep that score instead of 80s. Try to get it in the low to mid 70s. That favors Arkansas. That's what happened, 78-70. I think something similar today, even if it may not be realistic, if you can keep this game in the mid to high 70s, that favors Arkansas, maybe even low 80s. There's a chance there. If Arkansas goes to toe with Alabama and the score is higher than that, Arkansas is still in it. I still like Arkansas's chances coming down the stretch of in the last 4 minutes or so, playing at home and doing a better job of making decisions, doing a better job at the free throw line down the stretch. Remember, in the final 30 seconds against Texas, Arkansas was 7 of 8 at the free throw line. Adu Thero had fouled out about a minute prior to that, and he was the guy that was struggling at the line. So in a sense, that kind of worked out. Arkansas kind of backed into, they didn't have a bad free throw shooter on the court available to go take them, to be fouled and have to go shoot them. And freshmen were stepping up. I mean, again, I go back to Carter Knox, Billy Richmond, DJ Wagner hit a couple. I think the only one that missed a free throw down there was Trevor Brazile. Went one of 2 in that stretch. And prior to that, Arkansas was up 5, and Big Z missed the front end of a 1-and-1. And then Texas turned the ball over immediately. So that was with about between 37 and 44 seconds to go. But Alabama, again, they're so good in so many ways. Defensively, it's in KenPom is 81, I think, ranked 81st. And here's what Bama does really well, though. They block over 5 shots per game. Arkansas is a good shot blocking team. Alabama's top 20 in that regard. They're really good defending three-point shooting, 28.8%. Ranks up there. I think it's 12th in Division I in three-point field goal defense. So there's that. So Arkansas, it's been a strength in these last few games. Even the Oklahoma game that Arkansas lost, they shot 9 of 27, 33%. It's not terrible. And at that point, that was really the high water mark and for three-point makes an elite game for Arkansas. Then Arkansas went 13 of 25 against Kentucky, 9 of 18 at halftime in that game. This last game, Arkansas was 7 of 17. And again, one of my pregame talking points was maybe drive that number down from where it was against OU and Kentucky. And Arkansas did that, but they knocked down 7 of those 17, over 40%. So the last 3 games, including the loss to Oklahoma, Arkansas has been better from 3. Can they maintain that against a really good three-point shooting team? Alabama will turn the ball over. When you play at that pace, you're going to have some turnovers. Between 13.5 and 14 turnovers per game. This is a key, in my opinion, because what is Arkansas' strength on the season defensively in terms of making plays? That's getting live ball turnovers, getting steals, 10 against Kentucky, 8 against Texas. There's an opportunity today to pile up some steals and get out in transition and get some easy scores. And what happens when you turn teams over and you do that? A team like Alabama, that's one fewer possession for Alabama to have a chance to actually score. And if you can get an easy score, it softens the blows when Alabama's going to have some runs, because you're not going to freeze that team out. I was surprised by how well Arkansas controlled Kentucky on its home court with the pace it plays. Again, Lamont Butler being out was a big deal. But this is an Alabama team, when you look at Mark Sears, preseason SEC Player of the Year, has had some struggles at times, but playing well now again. But it's a team on a 5-game winning streak, but 18 points and 5 assists and over 3 rebounds. He's given Arkansas fits over the years, especially in Bud Walton Arena. Everybody talks about the games Brandon Miller had, but this guy has hurt Arkansas every year. He's a senior 6'1" guard. They've got Aiden Holloway, a double-figure scorer, and a really efficient scorer in that backcourt, as well as the true freshman LeBaron Philon. Arkansas's previous staff recruited him out of the state of Alabama. His brother played football, one of the great football Hogs. Excuse me, is it his brother or his cousin, a relative? what was it, Darius Philon? I was having to think of his name. Um, defensive lineman. But you look at that backcourt, and then front court, Grant Nelson, another player Arkansas recruited out of the portal, out of the Dakotas, who really came on last year and helped Alabama surge to go into a Final Four. He's having a big year, 13 points per game, over 8 rebounds. He's a shot blocker too. He's one of a couple. They got big Cliff Omarui out of the portal. And again, when you look at him percentage wise, aside from the 60% from 2-point field goals, which is elite, it's the 3-point shooting and the free throw shooting percentages don't wow you. It's just the sheer raw volume that kind of makes up for any difference. If you shoot a little better than from the line, you may not be taking 27 free throws per game. In Arkansas, not a team that's done that consistently. They've had some games, Florida, where they ran it up into the 30s. The same at was it Kentucky? Arkansas shot 30 plus free, ended up shooting, or maybe that was Texas, but they got enough free throws up against in these last several games to and shot well percentage wise to make you think maybe they can trade blows with Alabama in some of these areas. But I think getting live ball turnovers, getting Alabama turnovers is going to be big for Arkansas in this game. And then this is an elite rebounding team. Arkansas is not, despite the success they're having lately, and despite that second half effort against Georgia where they just pounded the offensive glass and turned that game around doing it that way, they've just not been true and sound on rebounding, especially keeping teams off the offensive glass. So Arkansas's had strong defensive possessions, and they can't close it out with a rebound, and it gets them into trouble areas. That will be a recipe for problems today against Bama. I'm not saying you have to win it, but you got to be more competitive there. It can't be very lopsided. And if it is, then you better be getting it from somewhere else. You better be getting it at the paint. I think Arkansas, again, the way you drive down the pace is to make good decisions on offense. You don't have to rush things unless you've got a wide open look and Alabama's having defensive breakdowns. Alabama's susceptible, again, not only to turnovers, but you can attack this team. And I think Arkansas needs to take the fight to Alabama. I say this game in and game out. Arkansas collectively, even without Boogie Flahan, talent-wise, athleticism-wise, in those areas, there's not a team with more talent. Or if they do, it's just on a small margin. I think Arkansas advantage size-wise, athleticism-wise, and some of the things that Arkansas can do. From a skill set standpoint, I wouldn't say that necessarily about Arkansas, but now we're starting to see the better version, maybe approaching the best version of Nelly Davis, and that's a little bit of a game changer. And he's doing it at both ends, and so there are matchups I like here. I think Arkansas, again, can take the fight to Alabama, get into the paint, get paint touches, and make that your primary way to play. Because Arkansas is not a pass-first kind of offense. But when Arkansas gets paint touches off drives, it does open up some good passing opportunities. Guys like Thero and Wagner can get downhill going to the basket. But Big Z's a good passer. DJ Wagner will find guys, especially rolling the basket on lob passes or clean bounce passes. Sometimes, this is where a guy like Jonas Adu struggles in the passing game a little bit simply because his hands aren't great. He doesn't, for whatever reason, he doesn't move nearly as well as he did last year. They've talked about the foot injury. He's never been declared to be better than 90% healthy. Whatever it is, he's not been great in two-man game. Avicic has probably been Arkansas's best option on the front line there. And really, you don't have a lot of opportunities in two-man game with Thero. You just want him on rolls because you're not going to get a lot of interaction with that. You just want him on a roll if you do play him in a screen set and get him the ball so he can get downhill and go to work. And it really becomes about him at that point, but that's fine because he can bully ball his way. All right, we're 53 minutes in. We're kind of going through some of the stuff that stands out to me and what I think might matter today. I had a vision in mind of keeping this to 30 minutes, and I'm approaching an hour. That's just how I roll. But I'm gonna move back because I talked recruiting, and I wanted to put focus in front and center on guys that Arkansas might be pursuing for class of 2025. I'm going to jump back to some other guys just very briefly. I did this the other night. I kind of finished that way. But just before I do that, I'm going to say this. Obviously, Alabama is going to be favored today. That's probably the right way to go about it. I think Arkansas is playing really well, and this is going to be a madhouse. I can't wait to get to Bud Walton Arena later today and see this atmosphere and cover this game. I mean, I'm excited about it. And because Kentucky was your top game of the season, that was away from home. This is the biggest game in Bud Walton Arena this year, in my opinion. And so I just can't wait to do it. But having said all that, I'm not going to predict Arkansas is going to win, but I think Arkansas is going to find a way to be in this game and have a shot at winning it late. And this is a, if someone wins by a blowout, I'd probably predict that'd be Alabama, but I think it's going to be there for the taking for Arkansas. And I give Arkansas a great shot at winning this game. I'm not going to predict it, but I really think Arkansas is going to be in this. And maybe that's just wishful thinking, but remember, these last 4 games, Arkansas has not only won 3 of them. They could be 4-0, but they found a way to play at grinding pace at home against Georgia and Oklahoma. They found a way to play at a big pace, at a fast pace at Kentucky, and win a game like that. They found a way to kind of be in between and play an in between kind of game, not a complete grinder, but not a big pace game necessarily against Texas. So they've shown more than one way to do it. And again, these last 2 games, they're out shooting teams that were better than them statistically, certainly offensively. Alabama's another threshold there, but you are at home. And again, just kind of sewing this up, I think Arkansas is going to be in it. And I like Arkansas's chances if it comes down to 1 or 2 possessions late in the game. And if Arkansas has a bigger cushion than that, 3 or 4 possession lead coming down the stretch, that would not shock me. Might surprise me a little bit, but it wouldn't shock me. Remember, Alabama does have a league loss, 3 on the season total, but a league loss at home by 10 to a really good Ole Miss team that beat Arkansas at Bud Walton Arena. Arkansas's 1-3 at home in league play. They need a signature win. They need to get that record turned around because they're certainly doing it on the road. All right, just real quick in recruiting, speaking of class of 2025, people ask me all the time about Terrion Burgess, 6'9" combo forward in Benton. I was in Benton last night for the Panthers home game, blowout win 80-48 over Whitehall. I was there to see 2 of the top freshmen, 9th graders, that are starters, one for Benton, one for Whitehall. I've been kind of putting my eyes on freshman players this week because that's where I really start. 8th and 9th grade, I start picking out some of the guys that have a potential to really continue to add, not only grow, but add to what they're doing. Because you get an idea of some of the guys that have a shot at being D1, high major guys, maybe players that can help Arkansas. So I saw Elijah Bryant. I talked about him in the post game after Texas the other night on Wednesday. Saw Elijah Bryant, a 9th grader that starts at North Little Rock in a heated rivalry game against Central that went to the wire, and how impressed I was with that 6'3" guard, and that he looks like a guy that could be one of the next big names coming out of the state if he continues on his path of development and growth. Already 6'3", athletic, good length, knockdown shooter from 3, steady, doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low, makes plays defensively. He's just a good player already as a 9th grader in the 6A Central. The talent level, the speed of the game, all those things, it doesn't get any better anywhere in the state. But last night, Anthony Spratt Jr., who I've seen multiple times. By the way, Elijah Bryant, who I just mentioned, will play with the Arkansas Hawks on the Adidas circuit. But last night, Anthony Spratt, a 6'4", 6'5"-ish guard, played with Bryson Warren, elite, and is now part of the Brad Bill program. He's a starter / 6-man for Benton, who's a really good 5A team. But he, last night, 19 points and an 80-48 win over Whitehall. But he's got a nice little game. He's a small forward wing type, maybe a combo guard as he continues to, when he gets to the point of going to the next level. But at 6'5", he's got good athleticism. He's got really good instincts, and he's putting together craft in his game. He had a nice Euro step last night, getting to the paint for a little floater that beat the end of the 3rd quarter buzzer. So he was a little bit under duress, but he stayed in control, and it was a nice move. There are a couple of inbound plays they ran for him where he got close range shots off just making a couple of good change of direction decisions and just getting a little closer to the rim to get a better shot. He can knock down the 3, hit 1 or 2 last night. He can dunk the ball at 6'4", 6'5" as a 9th grader. And when I say dunk, he's not, way above the rim, but he's doing it, he's got good athleticism. So Anthony Spratt Jr. is another player I look at, and Brad Bill Elite, again, has identified him. He's in that program. Another long-term Division I potential high major guy. So Elijah Bryant and Anthony Spratt Jr., talking about high school freshmen that are starters at really good on good teams that have other really good players. And then another player that's going to be with the Arkansas Hawks in ninth grade that starts for Whitehall, about 6-foot guard Brian Cal Jr. Going to keep an eye on him. He's a really crafty, uh, a confident player with a good skill set. He's going to end up being a really solid point guard all 4 years that he plays at Whitehall or wherever he's at in high school. He's at Whitehall now. But again, a 6', 6'1" guard, Brian Cal Jr., 15 points last night in a game where Whitehall was just outmanned. He really had a good game. So we'll see if he ends up developing into a high major or D1 guy, but he's a starter and a ninth grader playing in 5A. So that's kind of what my focus has been this week. But Terrion Burgess, class of 2025, the previous staff recruited him, a guy that was ranked as high as top 30, 32, 35 in the country. Rivals still has him at around 80th in the country. 6'9" combo forward, 4-star. His recruitment has Alabama was on him for the longest time. And, he looks stronger to me. I haven't seen him in a 6 weeks or so. He looks taller, stronger. But last night, a triple-double, and he played basically roughly third quarters in that blowout win. He played in each quarter, but he sat for long stretches because the game was in control. But 17 points, 16 rebounds, 10 assists, 4 blocks, and 3 steals. And Burgess, in a game like that, but he's the kind of guy that's capable because he's not your typical post player. He's a versatile guy, gets out and runs the court. He had 4 or 5 dunks last night, had a 3 and some close range stuff. But Burgess is a guy, although Arkansas is not on him, and we were talking about what might Arkansas do moving forward. Unless something changes, I don't see Arkansas in the picture for Burgess. But I reported this last night on Twitter that coaches from Seton Hall and San Diego State are trying to make plans to come out to check him out next week. He took a visit to Wichita State a while back. Little Rock Trojans have been on him heavily. We'll see if he decides to stay closer to home and go that route. Because unless you're a 5-star guy and a surefire guy as a true freshman at the high major level, you're probably not going to have the role that you envision for yourself with this in this transfer portal age. We're seeing that more and more. So who knows what direction he might decide to go. But I thought I'd give people an update on Burgess because I'm asked about him all the time. And the previous staff was prioritizing him to some degree out of that 2025 class here in the state of Arkansas. All right, now it is a wrap, other than I will say one last thing. 5-star class of 2026, J.J. Andrews, had his second 40-point game this week. He had one recently where he had 43 points. He's rolling at Little Rock Christian Academy, averaging about 30 points and 10 or so rebounds per game on the season. Took his Arkansas visit in late December. Just took a visit to Marquette. He's got another one scheduled, not this weekend, but the next weekend to Oklahoma. Let's see what kind of I'm going to go out to a game and interview him and ask him a timeline here soon on a decision, because he's in no hurry necessarily to do that, but he's knocked out a bunch of official visits. Remember, prior to Arkansas, and I get ready, he just took one to Marquette after the Arkansas visit just a week or so ago. Prior to Arkansas, it was Missouri and North Carolina State where he had visited. So again, OU's on the horizon. We'll see what other plans he has. But until tonight, I'm going to be coming back. I'm doing a post-game live from Bud Walton Arena, hopefully after a Razorback victory. I went over an hour. How wild is that? That's just what I do. But I appreciate for everyone that stuck in here with me. We're glad that you're here joining us for HogvilleNET YouTube Live. We like bringing the content. We hope that it's informative. But until later tonight, take care, and I'll see you then.